And then tell that yo, this nigga threw a ball, bro. Yo, he threw a ball. Yo, did he throw a ball?
Yes, he did throw a bomb. New York City just got a front row seat to what happens when radical Islamic terrorism shows up on your doorstep, and the mayor's first instinct is to blame white supremacy. Over the weekend, far-right activist Jake Lang organized a protest outside Gracie Mansion, which is the home of the New York City Mayor. The rally was called Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City. Provocative? Sure. But it was a legal protest against what they see as a growing Islamist influence in the city. Then came the counter-protest. Two guys from Pennsylvania, 18 to 19 years old, showed up and threw improvised explosive devices packed with nails, screws, and shrapnel right into the crowd of anti-Islam protesters. One device was lit and thrown. It fizzed out before exploding. But make no mistake, these were nail bombs meant to maim and kill. Video shows a hooded figure hurling one of them. Witnesses on the scene said he shouted Allah Akbar when throwing the bomb. During the chaos, NYPD body cam and federal complaints confirm it. These weren't random troublemakers. Balat pledged allegiance to ISIS. The other one yelled ISIS while being handcuffed. This was an attempted terrorist attack on American soil in the heart of New York City, targeting protesters who dare to criticize radical Islam. And what did New York's first Muslim mayor say? Well, in his initial statement on Saturday, he called the original protest a vile protest rooted in white supremacy. He labeled Jake Lang as a white supremacist and said hate like that has no place in New York. He described the bomb throwing as even more disturbing and criminal, but he never once mentioned the Islamist angle. He also didn't mention ISIS or terrorism in that first response. Only after the ISIS connection blew up publicly, literally after charges were filed and the NYPD commissioner confirmed it was ISIS-inspired, did Mamdani pivot. On Monday, he finally said the suspect committed heinous acts of terrorism and that they should be held accountable. How convenient. First blame white supremacy for everything. Only when the evidence is undeniable do you admit it was radical Islamic terrorism. This isn't new. We've seen this pattern over and over. When violence comes from certain directions, leaders rush to condemn the victims or twist it into Islamophobia or bigotry. Meanwhile, the real threat, jihadist ideology that inspires people to build bombs and target Americans, gets soft-pedaled or ignored altogether until it's impossible to deny. Mamdani lives in Gracie Mansion. These guys came to his doorstep to commit terrorism. Yet his knee-jerk reaction was to attack the protesters as racist instead of immediately calling out the jihadists who attempted to cause serious harm to Americans on American soil. Literally, in the name of the ideology he shares a faith with, even if he doesn't support the violence. New Yorkers elected him knowing his background, but they didn't sign up for a mayor who shields radical Islam from criticism while throwing the white supremacy card at anyone who points out the problem. This should have been a wake-up call. Terrorism doesn't care about your politics or your address. It shows up anyway. And when it does, leaders need to call it like it is. ISIS-inspired radical Islamic extremism. And without all the deflections. Instead, we get excuses, delayed condemnations, and finger-pointing at the wrong people. If this had been reversed, if white supremacists threw bombs at a Muslim rally, the headlines would scream far-right terrorists for weeks. But when it's ISIS fans attacking critics of Islam, crickets from some corners until forced to speak. Wake up, New York. Your mayor's priorities are showing, and they're putting ideology over your safety. That's the reality of Mamdani's New York City right now. And let's talk about where these two came from. Reports confirm that both are U.S. citizens. Their parents immigrated from Turkey and Afghanistan. One of the kids grew up in a $2.5 million mansion. Nice house, good schools, the American dream handed to them. Yet, instead of assimilating, they allegedly turned to ISIS propaganda, traveled abroad, including to Turkey and other spots, and came back to attack Americans. They raise serious questions, even with legal immigration and citizenship, that radicalization can happen, but also shows why we need a strong, vetted immigration system. One that prioritizes assimilation, screens for extremist views, and doesn't just rubber stamp entry from high-risk regions without deep checks. We cannot afford to import radical ideologies that reject our freedoms and then act on them violently. Asylum and naturalization should come with real integration requirements, not just paperwork. When families flee war or persecution, great. America welcomes that. But when their kids repay it by pledging to ISIS and bombing protesters, that's a failure we have to address head on. But these have been my thoughts, not yours. Drop your comments below. I appreciate you watching. You have a great day.